with CEOs and millionaires. I've never seen my vision be more crystal clear. Look in the mirror, see the change in who I used to be. I kept going, knew success would come eventually. But ask about me back then, they said I wouldn't make it. Nowadays they doubt less and tend to ask for favors. Poetic music, that's realness, don't let them tell you different. And if you ever lost in doubt, then follow your intuition. These words of wisdom is for those who's trying to find their purpose. Don't be living just to die, cause only death is certain. I'm working hard so I can toast to my accomplishments. Cause see, I lost it all and I ain't been the same since. I'm more focused, more ambitious, more everything. Grew up with nothing, now I appreciate the finer things. I know it's real when at the shows they ask for autographs. And now they know the name, they ain't gotta ask. Yeah.
Where did you get a Shure microphone? I didn't know that they still made microphones.
Yeah, no, they're out there, that's for sure. So yeah, my next guest here is Bob Gold. Bob Gold is a member of the Denver Jewish War Veterans Post 344, and he's been a member for quite a number of years, and has lived in Colorado for a long while, and he'll be able to kind of elaborate a little bit more on his story and his service to the country and what he's been up to since. So thanks, Bob, for taking the time to do this.
Okay, yeah, go with the questions.
Okay. Yeah, so I guess at the beginning, for me, normally what I try to do is like talk about, so where are you originally from?
Chicago.
Chicago? And what part?
Far north side, Rogers Park.
Okay. I have some friends from like Northbrook area. But then when
I don't even know where that is.
And when did you leave Chicago?
When well, I went off to MIT to college, but I came back in the summers, and in 1959 I got married and went to Northwestern after MIT, both for some undergraduate school and then for medical school. And in 1960, when I finished medical school, I joined the Air Force.
Oh, wow. And what made you join the Air Force? I mean, you know, like these days, most people that took the track that you went going to MIT, then going to Northwestern, most of those people don't join the military afterwards. What made you want to join the military at the time? And can you give a time frame of when that was?
That was 1964.
Okay.
And in 1964, there was no draft except for doctors.
Oh, did not know there was a draft for doctors.
So the choice was get 75 hours a month to be an intern. There were interns back then. Doctors learned to be doctors, not like they are now. Now they're super specialized, and if you go to one doctor, he can't look in an ear because he wasn't trained in that. And then there was, that was the Chicago hospital that's on TV. They offered me 75 hours a month, and Northwestern offered me something like 125, and the Air Force offered me 620. And I had a child, and I was married, and had to go in anyway, so I went and took my internship at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio.
Okay. And so tell me a little bit about how you grew up and your family. So first of all, what year were you born?
May 7th, 1938.
Okay. We're actually our birthdays are only one day apart. The 1938. And so did your father serve in World War II?
No,
No. And how many siblings did you have growing up?
one
Yeah.
sister.
And so when you guys were growing up, did can you tell me a little bit about like what your parents did? Like, were they immigrants? Were they born in the U.S.? That kind
No,
of stuff.
my grandparents were immigrants. Depending on the year, they immigrated either from Poland or Russia.
Okay. And then with that, when did the family move to Chicago? Like immediately, or like stayed in like the New York area and then eventually moved west? Or
Well, actually, my father uh, lived down in Georgia
oh, okay,
with his father, and his father was originally one of these guys that drove around with a horse or a drawn wagon with pots and pans and odds and ends on it.
okay. And then so you guys were growing up in the north side of Chicago. What did your dad do there for work?
He was a restaurateur.
Okay,
He owned restaurants.
got it. And then was being Jewish like a big part of your family's identity? Did you guys go to shul? Did you have a synagogue? You go to camps, that kind of stuff growing up?
Well, I don't. The family wasn't very religious. I went to Hebrew school and eventually got bar mitzvahed, and mostly with private tutoring because until I got older, I was not very educationally cooperative.
So it came later in life in a sense of like your commitment to learning in that sense, or
Well, when I got into sixth grade, I realized that the only way to get ahead was to be educated. So I started doing better then and did well in high school. So
right.
I got an MIT.
So when did you go to MIT? Like what years?
Uh, I graduated from high school in 1956. And this was
Got
when I
it.
went to MIT.
Okay. And so what? Let's talk about. So what did you study in MIT?
Electrical engineering.
Okay. And then what made you switch from engineering to medical?
Well, I had two jobs during the summer with engineering company, electronic engineering company, and I didn't like the fact that it was very the control was very strict, and you know, if you were working for one guy and another guy came along that was one step above him, he could change what you were doing, and I just didn't like it. So after my second year, my fiance Marsha was in nursing school, so I decided to switch to medicine. And the third and fourth year, I went to Northwestern undergraduate school because there was no pre-med at MIT. There is now, but there wasn't then.
Got it. And when you were there, did you enjoy MIT as a school? Like the people that went there, the professors, etc.
It was very challenging, and there's 5 or 10% of the students could flip through a physics book or a math book or whatever, and just flip through it and get the best grades on the test. And then there's those like me that had to slave over it every night and manage to get B's, occasional A, occasional C, but mostly B's. And but it was so highly respected After 2 years at MIT, Northwestern accepted all my grades and technically made me a senior at Northwestern.
Oh
But
wow.
to graduate from Northwestern, you had to have 2 years in a school. So I plodded along the third and fourth year, taking first and second year courses because back then there were a lot of required courses for medical school, which don't exist anymore
Right.
either. So
So
I went there for 2 years, and then towards the end of the fourth year, second year at Northwestern, I applied to medical schools, and Harvard didn't accept me. I didn't really want to go to Harvard anyway, and Northwestern was one of the three schools in the Chicago area that accepted me, so that's where I went, which is a downtown school, not a school in Evanston. It's a completely separate school
got
from
it.
the undergraduate school.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting how life kind of throws a couple curveballs at you. I kind of felt the same way actually. I don't know if you know this. So I when I was in the military, I wanted to be a dentist. And so my route was to be a dentist.
Well, in Texas,
No, dentist. I wanted to like do things.
okay.
Yeah, so I joined as a dental assistant thinking that I was going to go get a biology degree and then go to medical school and become a dentist, and I hated it. So I had to figure something else out real quick. Um, so I totally understand the life's not linear scenario in that sense, and having to kind of
So
go.
what did you go into from dentistry?
I went and tried out for the Green Berets, and that's what I did for the last 10 years of
When
my
you went
career.
in the military?
Yeah, yeah. So then I got out after that, but yeah.
How
So
long were you in?
12 years.
Were you in the Green Berets?
Yeah, for like 10 years. So, um,
When were you in Vietnam?
I was not in Vietnam. I'm not that. I was born in 1980, so we got a couple years between us.
How
Um,
old are you?
I just turned 40 this year or last year.
I turned I turned 83 in May.
Yeah. So, um, and so with that, when you finished Northwestern, you joined the Air Force. And where was your first station at?
Wright-Patterson Air Force Base Hospital in Dayton, Ohio.
Okay. And then how many years were you in?
7 years, 4 months, and 18 days. It's
You
it's
you
it's
must.
on your DD 214, is it?
Yeah.
The charge paper. They have it there with years, months, and days. So
Yeah.
I just sit down and figure it out.
That's funny. And when during your time in the military, was there certain moments or anything else that you recall that just when you think about it today, just that looking back at that time, is there anything in particular that you miss about that time, or that you really appreciated during that time?
Well, I took a very different course of training than when we get out of our internship, we're supposed to get assigned to a base to practice medicine. We had a 2 year obligation, but one of my instructors, when I came there, my first 2 months was in the emergency room. It was a rotating internship, but my first 2 months happened to be in the emergency room, and my instructor there was a former Air Force pilot. But once he became a doctor, they wouldn't let him fly anymore.
Hmm. Worth
So I
more.
told him I was already a pilot,
Mm-hmm.
you know, private pilot. And I said, I always wanted to, to do that, be a jet pilot. He said, apply. So in August, which was my second month, there were no doctors being accepted for pilot training at that time.
Okay.
So in August, I applied. In December, I got my orders for July 1st, which was to NASA Houston, which I since have found out would have been a fantastic assignment because I would have gone out to the destinations of all the power. Well, I see by turning off my computer screen, you have no light. I'm perfectly black.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, that I would have been going around to all the emergency bases for the Apollo flights and the Gemini flights and stuff like that. But uh, so that's where I was ready to go. And sometime in May, I get notified that somebody is looking for Captain Gold. Doctors came in as captain.
Right.
So I finally get a hold of this guy, and it's Colonel so and so from headquarters. And he said, "What base do you want to go to?" Well, I didn't have a clue. I finally, when a colonel's talking to you, you finally have to say something. And I finally spit out that I'm assigned to NASA Houston. And he said, "Oh, you don't know you've been accepted to pilot training."
Oh wow.
Out of the blue. And then he told me the bases that were available, and I picked Williams Air Force Base in Mesa. Well, actually, it's in outside of Mesa, Arizona, in Chandler, Arizona, is what they say now. And uh, that's where I took my training. And then I took training at in San Antonio at not Brooks, but
And then
at
with the
what?
training that happened, um, tell me about that training, like how that was. I mean, was it? I mean, you went to MIT. Would you compare it, the math and the physics and everything else that you're dealing with as in flight training? Is it just as hard as, if not harder than, what you were doing at MIT?
No way. I got the academic training award without even trying.
Really?
Flying, I had a whole class. I was only fourth or fifth. So anyway, we got to choose our assignments, and I chose because I knew if I took a fighter plane, like F4s were available and stuff, then that I'd be away from home all the time. And by then we had two kids, and so I took being a T-38 instructor pilot. So after 55 weeks at Williams Air Force Base, I went down to Randolph Air Force Base and took my instructor pilot training down there.
Mm-hmm. San Antonio.
So after that, I got assigned to Del Rio, Texas, Laughlin Air Force Base as an instructor pilot, where the rabbits are bigger than the deer. Really, you can hold up a rabbit, and you have to hold it up 4 feet by its ears, so its feet don't touch the ground. And the deer are about the size of a good size Doberman or something like that.
Yeah.
And from there, I was there for 6 months, and I got an infection of my heart, pericarditis. So I was grounded, and I practiced as a flight. I did never mentioned after my internship before I went to Williams for the flight training. I went through flight surgeons training at Brooks Air Force Base. So that would have been like July of 65 until I started pilot training in the fall of 65. So anyway, I was assigned to Laughlin Air Force Base, got sick, grounded in the hospital for a couple of weeks. And since they didn't have a slot for me, I'm sure you know about slots and being places, uh, that I requested to go to Brooks Air Force Base. They're keeping you well hydrated. Uh, then said they assigned me to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, uh, Aerospace Medical Research Laboratory. So that was supposed to be a minimum of a 3-year tour. I got back on flying status, but I wasn't an instructor pilot anymore. I was just flying planes out of Wright-Patterson, like every what's called behind the line pilot did, which means you're not assigned as a pilot, but you fly so much a month to stay current and
Right.
earn your flight ticket. And uh, anyway, that was supposed to be a 3-year tour. At 14 months, I get orders to Vietnam, which was a big mistake.
Vietnam or you going?
Me being assigned.
Okay.
It turned out that that was it was in 63. Uh, I was there 69 and 70. So in 68, the Colorado National Guard, which flew F-100s, their whole squadron was assigned to Vietnam. And the squadron had a flight surgeon that was assigned to them, a psychiatrist. So he went with them, and when he came back, some idiot in San Antonio decided a doctor come back, a doctor has to go. So they plucked me out, and I'm a good American patriot, so I had to make a big stink about it. I went in March of 69. I was assigned to a base called Phan Rang in Vietnam, and I was assigned as a doctor, not as a pilot. And I get to the base, and I walk up to the hospital commander, and I said, I'm Major Gold, and I've been assigned to your hospital as a flight surgeon. His response was, who are you? What are you doing here? And I don't have a slot for you.
Sounds about
The
right.
flight surgeon that went back with the Colorado National Guard took the slot with him because the slot belonged to the Colorado National Guard. So he said, well, the 612 doesn't have a flight surgeon. Go bunk with them. So I walk in, first person I meet is the squadron commander, and he sees my pilot swings, and he says, you're a pilot? I said, yes, sir. He says, well, you got to fly. I said, twist my arm. Well, since I was an odd man out at at the hospital. I was either part of the time I was hospital commander, it depended on data rank. Most of the time I was deputy hospital commander, chief of aerospace medicine, slots which didn't exist. That's what I was assigned. That's what's on my record. But there was no slot assigned to him at the hospital. So I was pretty free to go any place I wanted. So I checked out the F-100. You're not supposed to fly two airplanes of different types when you're in the Air Force, but every base had a C-47, which is the old DC-3,
Yeah.
but they only assigned two pilots to them, and it's a two-pilot airplane. So they couldn't go on R&R or go on leave or anything because they were both needed to fly the airplane. The minute they found out I was there and a pilot in the hospital, they called up and said, "How would you like to fly the C-47?" And I said, "Why would I want to do that? I'm flying F-100s." Well, they said, "You can fly with us once a week. You can fly out of country once a month." Uh, Bangkok 5 times, Hong Kong 4 times, uh, the Philippines twice, Utapao once, at the version of Taiwan once. And that was an amazing thing because he stood in the middle of the town in 1969, and it's crowded. I mean, shoulder to shoulder people, and short me is this much a head above everybody else.
You felt good that day?
I felt very large that day. Uh, so, I was doing all that flying, and tell you the truth, I wasn't married. I would have extended because I was having a ball. You know, doing all this flying, being free to do anything I wanted on base. Uh, it's just, it was just, and career wise, it was a good assignment.
Right. It's funny how
But
mistakes can happen like that, where they end up being in your benefit.
well, the problem was, of course, over my uh, 7.5 years, I had 7 assignments.
Ooh.
My wife considered a 3 or 4 year TDY for pilot training and for flight training and for all these things. They were like a permanent change of station because we had to pack up our stuff and and move to a new living place. And when I came back from Vietnam, first they tried to assign me to Colorado Springs to the base in Colorado Springs as a flight surgeon.
Mm-hmm.
Which was ridiculous since I had, I think they were called AFOQTs, which are assignment numbers, as a pilot, as a research physician, and as a flight surgeon. So to assign me to a 2 or 3 doctor thing was ridiculous. Besides which, I only had about six more months left on my assignment. But the thing was back then, if you came back for Vietnam, if you weren't eligible for discharge, even though I had almost 4 months of leave coming, I wasn't eligible for discharge, so I had to serve a year. And when I got that assignment, I went a little bit ballistic because it was another total move. Marshall was still living in our house in Dayton, Ohio, and the lab was willing to take me back. So I had to write a letter to my congressman, and it took him about 12 days to get the orders changed. But by that time, Marcia said me or the Air Force because of all the moves.
Right.
I can't really blame her. And so I go back to Wright-Patterson. I do some research on hypoxia in pilots and crew members. And I looked around for something to become because she said I couldn't stay in the Air Force. I mean, the promise of a 3-year tour at Wright-Patterson turned out to be nothing. I mean, my longest tour in 7.5 years was 14 months at
Right.
Wright-Patterson. So I decided after looking around that I'd become an anesthesiologist. Big mistake. But anyway,
Why is that?
Are you looking for another drink?
No, no, no. I'm plugging in my phone. Um, no, I was just asking what makes anesthesiologists. Well, I mean, you've done
Well,
so much, so
because you give all your drugs IV and you know within 5 to 60 seconds whether you were right or wrong. It's not like giving an IM shot, and if it's bad for the person, they might have an anaphylactic shock a half an hour later. And I like pharmacology and that kind of stuff, and I looked around, and this was already June and July, no, late May, and called around to some hospitals that I was interested in going to, including Evanston Hospital. And of course, to start July 1st, they all thought it was a big joke for me to be applying in May for a July 1st opening. And they all said, sorry, can't do it. But I was regular Air Force, so I didn't have to get out of the Air Force
right,
at any specific date. So sometime in July, while I was working on this research project, somebody starts calling around Wright-Patterson, which is 30,000 people, looking for major goals. It turned out to be Evanston Hospital. Two of their doctors had gotten drafted. They were still drafting doctors.
right,
So they asked me if I wanted to go. So I started in September, 3 months late. You don't want to start a training program 3 months late. I was behind all the way. I mean, the first 6 months of training is all academics. So I had missed the 3 months out of 6 months of academics. Anyway, that was 2 years. Then I practiced anesthesia in Denver. At first, I was going to a number of hospitals and finally settled down at Mercy Hospital in Denver, Colorado, because they had an opening. Uh, Stayed there for 2 years. I did anesthesia for almost 20 years. Really didn't like it because an anesthesiologist is under the surgeon.
right,
And the first thing they told me when I went into the anesthesia, into the training, is never turn your back on a surgeon because if push comes to shove, he'll stab you in the back. And, and they were the ones that chose you. They scheduled the anesthesiologist. So you had to literally lick their you know what to stay in their good graces so you got business.
right,
But as an example, back in the middle time of my career in anesthesia, uh, there was an anesthetic called halothane, which is an excellent anesthetic, but it's very occasionally, once in 10,000 times, could cause uh, liver problems. And I didn't, once they said that, we didn't regularly use it except on children because it was so great and kids didn't get the what was called halothane hepatitis. So one of the surgeons that I worked with full time comes storming into an operating room, yelling and screaming at me, where that his patient got hepatitis because I used halothane on the patient. Well, it was well documented in a record that I hadn't used halothane. There's multiple places it's written down. It's written down by me. It's written down by the nurse, circulating nurse. But he makes this big fuss in the operating room of another doctor, and it's just an example of what can go on. And another case was near the very end of when I was last year. I was practicing. A surgeon that I used all the time came into the operating room and says, "I got a case I got to do to follow yours." Well, I had another surgeon scheduled for a case at that time. I said, "I can't change it. Front desk up front has to change it." He
Right.
stormed out of the room, never used me again, never gave me a case again because I wouldn't screw the other doctor.
Wow.
Anyway, after 20 years, well, let's back up a little. For the last 11 years of practice in anesthesia, I was planning to move to Israel.
Oh wow.
I was going twice a month and volunteering with the Israeli Air Force in their aerospace medical research lab in the altitude chamber, which they had just received and they were not completely familiar with it, had no supervising physicians or anything. So I did that and fell in love with it and stuff and considered moving earlier, but my kids were at a bad age. They were at ages where they'd be changing to Hebrew schools in their before teens and early teens, and that didn't work out. So
So
we
so
planned.
so hold on one
I
second.
bored you.
So you this was when you were trying to move to Israel. What year was that?
I was considering moving to Israel. I was volunteering in Israel 2 months a year, a month at a time. I stopped practicing anesthesia and go over to Israel.
But like
And
what time frame was that? Because you mentioned your kids were younger. So what year
yeah,
was that?
well, I practiced anesthesia from 64 to 88.
Okay, got it.
And let me see, wasn't so I was going there, and when they got more proficient in their altitude chamber, I did other stuff with the Air Force and got real friendly with the head flight surgeon over there. In fact, the chief of aerospace medicine in Israel was an obstetrician. He was also a pilot physician, and he tried to get me to come over before I actually did move and be in the Air Force. They offered me to become a major in the Israeli Air Force. So uh, that didn't happen either because that was in the same time frame when I was volunteering. I had met him at an aerospace medical meeting here in the United States. Anyway, quite a bit of the time before we moved in '88, there was no Shalia here in Denver. And I actually acted pretty much as a Shalia here for 5 or 6 years. And they send somebody in for a day or two, 4 times a year to handle the actual paperwork for people who wanted to make Aliyah. But I did the monthly meetings and filled people in on the certain aspects such as electronics and and other aspects of living in Israel. I had already spent quite a bit of time there because I was going 2 months a year.
Right.
I went 11. I went 11 times
In one
before I
year?
made Aliyah. And anyway, moved there in '88 because there was no job. The We got put in a living area which was like a motel room and stuff over in the old city of Jerusalem, and there was a program where they had a 1 year stipend that if somebody hired me, uh, that they'd pay the first year's salary. And I had a friend from ham radio. I'd been talking to Israel for 20 years on my ham radio. And
Do you know Morse code?
yeah, we used to handle phone patches, if you know what that was. It was
Y-
before you could call on a cell phone for nothing. A three
Yeah.
minute call when we lived in Israel cost $17. So we used to handle phone patches.
Yeah.
And so I knew him from that. And he said if I could get the stipend, he could get me a job with the Geological Service in Israel. So there was one guy, there was like 6 slots for 200 people. And there was one guy in a building, a 6-story building in downtown Jerusalem, old city of Jerusalem. And every weekday, I'd walk down there and climb 6 flights of stairs and ask him if there was an opening. Well, after seeing me for 6 months, he finally found an opening, and I started working for the Geological Survey. Of course, one of the big things for the geology in Israel is that all the earthquakes back then were reported to a central place by radio.
Mm.
So I got involved with them designing their radio system and doubling the number of channels that they could use. And we also, right before I left them, I stole, Jordan was using the same radio system. They were both American earthquake systems,
Hmm.
and they were using the same one. So I stole 3 of their 6 signals from Jordan because Israel didn't have the fault line runs down the Dead Sea
Oh, got it.
and the Sea of Galilee and down into Saudi Arabia and Iran and all that.
So
So
with I know a little bit about what you're talking about. So with that system, essentially, was it FM or AM that you were taking from them, or was it a different frequency range altogether as far as that system was concerned?
they had multiple discrete signals, and we multiplexed signals on that.
Got it.
Okay, Motorola set it up. They didn't know what they were doing. Do you know anything about FM modulation?
I do. I'm an old commo geek, so when the Q course we learn about Morse
They were
code, we
running.
learn about a bunch of stuff. So
They were running their multiplex at full deviation,
okay,
5 kilohertz deviation, and once they went beyond three stations, 3 multiplexes, all the intermixing destroyed all the others above that.
got it.
So it took me a while to figure that out because they were totally uncooperative. And when I did, I just backed it all off to 1.5 kilohertz, and we ran six on one frequency.
Okay.
So
And then
we only
you had to set up basically
did
base stations along the way to or repeater nets to get it to where all the information was flowing to, right?
well all these at each earthquake station.
Mm-hmm.
There was a transmitter, solar cells, and the geological stuff, and it would modulate one transmitter, and that would go to the highest point on the West Bank, where we would have these repeaters that would take six of the signals and multiplex them together,
Got it.
and then send them down as six. Because each of those took a frequency too.
Right.
So if you had to multiply, had to relay them on a discrete signal, you didn't have enough frequency.
And then you got to have
So
enough.
anyway,
Then you got to have
we
enough
get ready.
power to. Each time you hit a repeater, the dB gain loses, so you have to make sure that the signal is strong enough to get to the next spot. Correct?
Yeah, well, the repeater reinforces the strength of the signal. It demodulates it, cleans it up, and then transmitted it in a multiplexed signal
Okay.
down to the station. The home base was in Havon. You familiar with Israel?
Yeah, absolutely.
In Havon near the coast, and the repeater stations were in the West Bank on, I forgot the name of the hill, but some hill that could see virtually the whole West Bank. Anyway, the problem with earthquake detection in Israel is that the fault is in the Dead Sea and the Kinneret and down the valley. And to pinpoint an earthquake, you need to be able to triangulate it.
Right.
And if you just have stations on one side, you don't get a good triangulation.
So did you use the Jordanian infrastructure to triangulate to be able to get that signal what you needed?
I intercepted 3 of the stations.
That's what I thought, but I just wanted to be sure.
On the other side.
Right. Because you had to get the points to be able to triangulate and get the exact spots. And if you don't have all the infrastructure built, then that's awesome.
And build them fed them into our hilltop to be multiplexed down to them. And since they were using the same American equipment, there was no incompatibility.
That's awesome.
Anyway, after I'd been there 6 months and taught them how to put up towers and everything else, because Motorola would charge them thousands of dollars to put up a tower at one of these earthquake stations. I mean, you couldn't have the multi-element beam on the ground. You had to have it 20, 30 feet in the air.
Yeah.
So we did a few of those. And anyway, about that time, they decided to have me quit pestering this guy, and they gave that was my mistake. When I was working for the earthquake people, it was with that subsidy from the government. But during that time, some other hams that I knew worked for the police department. And so one of them invited me over to the ballistics laboratory. And I just seemed to have an ability to match patterns. I was there a couple of hours, and the head of the department, who was an American, got me hired. So the last year and a half, I worked in the ballistics department of the Israeli police, and I was a captain in the Israeli police department. So that I enjoyed.
So ultimately, the reason you didn't move. I mean, I've noticed a trend in a sense of you've done a lot of things in life, but when it comes time to make a big life decision, your partner has definitely put her foot down in a sense of like we can't keep going this route a couple times. Do you think that's the key to like a great marriage and a great partnership is having somebody there to kind of be the brakes in some instances like that?
It was her brakes, not my brakes. Um,
No,
we,
I get it.
the thing was, when I left Israel, I was 52,
Right.
and shortly thereafter, the new chief of police was installed, and he said everybody has to retire at 55. So I would have had to retire in 3 years.
Right.
And one thing I learned about Israel, it's not an easy place to retire.
Yeah.
And we had no family there. I mean, the first year, everybody invited us over their house for the holidays and stuff. And the second year around, they that got a little old for them, and so most of the people that I ran into were not ultra orthodox, but knitted kippah, and we didn't fit in. We didn't even attend a reformed show when we were in Israel,
And
and we felt pretty
your wife and family were with you the entire time you were there?
about my wife and family.
Were they in Israel with you when you were over there working and doing some of that stuff?
That was the problem. It was just Marsha and me. It was $17 for a 3-minute call home,
Mm-hmm.
and we started having grandchildren.
Yeah.
And Marcia, the last time I sent her home for 2 months, I was there alone for 2 months, which was no big deal because I had a lot of friends through the department, where I worked and stuff, and through ham radio.
Mm-hmm.
And so we came back in 1990, and I started working part time in a medical clinic for businesses. It was called Clinicare. And, they just saw people coming in from workplaces and treated them. And if they were ambulance cases, we just triage them and ship them off to the hospitals and stuff. But we did suturing and stuff and treating and stuff like that. In 19, let me see, back when I was an anesthesiologist, I had bought an airplane, so I had been doing some flying and stuff. And when I came back, I sold that airplane, and when I came back, I was doing flying again, and I saw this company advertising in the want ad sections of the newspaper when people used to advertise. It was called a company called Sky Fighters, and they took people up on simulated air combat rides.
Oh wow.
So in 1994, I went into them and asked them what kind of medical questions did they ask their people before they took them up flying.
Right.
Oh, we don't do that. I said, how can you not do that with the liability involved of taking these people up and pulling 3, 4, 5 Gs? And so I got hired on there as their flight surgeon, but rapidly started flying with them. By 95, the guy who set it up, it wasn't doing that well, and he and his wife, who she did the office work, started stealing some money, so we kicked them out. I ended up being the primary stockholder, and we ran the company till 2007, when all my pilots were over 70 years old, and we decided probably time to get out of the business.
Right.
And since
When's the last time you've
1902,
flown?
I'm sorry,
When's the last time you've flown?
a couple weeks ago,
That's awesome.
I still have an airplane,
Yeah,
a
what kind?
different one, uh, Vans RV-8A.
Okay.
It's a
And
home built. I didn't build it, but it's a home built. It's relatively fast airplane. It'll go almost 200 miles an hour, or I can pull the throttle back and go at about 155 and burn maybe 5 or 6 gallons an hour of, of $4, $4 to $5 a gallon, dollars a gallon fuel.
so what's
Gasoline is very expensive.
I mean, I kind of can guess this, but what's your engineer, medicine, flying, aviation? Out of the three, which one was the most fun, and which one is just for you?
Anesthesia was just
Okay.
because of the reason I told you.
Yeah.
Flying in the Air Force, the fighter jets, and flying supersonic and all that stuff. Flying, even in sky fighters, we did a lot of formation flying, where we fly 3 feet apart from each other
Mm-hmm.
with customers. We didn't let the customers fly.
Yeah.
When they flew, they were hundreds of feet apart.
Right.
And the interesting thing is, people think that's dangerous having a non-flyer fly 100 feet apart. But if they turn towards the other airplane, they stop going forward. So they immediately fall behind the other airplane.
Right.
So there's no way from 200 feet out that they can turn into the other airplane and run into it. Unlike when we're flying 3 feet apart and I'm halfway up on the other airplane.
Got it. Yeah, I've never flown, obviously, but I've jumped out of planes. That's enough for me.
How many jumps did you have with your group?
Oof. At least over 50. I can't remember the exact number, but I was a jump master, so I was kicking dudes out of the plane a lot of the time. So
The closest I came to jumping out is when we were in flight surgeons. I remember it was flight surgeons training, pilot training. They would tow us up to 500 feet behind a truck
mm-hmm.
and then release us, and we'd come down the last 500 feet under the parachute and have to do a landing.
Right.
That was supposed to avoid having a broken leg if you have to jump out in enemy territory.
So you did a little PLF training, like parachute landing training
Well, we
there.
it's jumping off of 6 feet, you know, elevated portions underground and stuff.
Right.
Have some questions, go to it.
Yeah. So just to kind of wrap it up, I guess. You're still. You're in your 80s. You're actively involved. You're still flying. Like, what keeps you going in that fashion? Because I know a lot of people would just be like, I'm gonna enjoy these last parts of my years and just kind of lay low and everything else. I mean, you're pretty active, I think, still in the community as far as the flying community, the veteran community. What's your drive? Like, where do you get that from?
Well, the last 3 months I've been in the attitude that you described, sitting around in jail at home and occasionally running out to fly. All the people I used to fly with have either had medical problems, died, or just quit flying.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't have anyone to fly formation with. My airplane is a 2-seat aircraft, so if you want to get in the back seat, I can take you up and do some rolls and loops and stuff like that.
I might have to take you up on that when I get back.
Okay. Well, the best time not to take me up on it in July and August when it's super hot,
Yeah.
because my airplane is not air conditioned.
Okay. I appreciate that. Yeah, I just,
So how are you going to use all this stuff you collected? Uh, I'm sure I'm sure I left out stuff. It's sort of hard to uh, sit down and spell it all out. The
no,
hospital I was born in Chicago was Michael Reed Hospital, and that might be of interest to my kids. And
I just think, I think for us, like this is, I wish I did this sooner, to be honest, with folks, because obviously we've lost a couple of folks at the post. But you can't dwell on that. You just gotta keep moving forward in a sense of being sure to capture not only the stories but the essence of the people, and that's what I want to leave behind as far as folks that, because I think things have changed overall in our country, in a sense of this selfless service kind of action that I see amongst your generation and maybe the generation behind you, but it doesn't resonate with folks. They don't have the same purpose that you guys had, like there was something intertwined with living in America at the time of having a
yeah,
formidable enemy of the Soviets, right? In a sense that brought people together. And I don't think we have that right now in the country. I think it can come back, but I just think,
not in my lifetime. I forgot a big part of my military history when I was talking to you.
okay.
When I came, let me see, when I was still practicing medicine, anesthesia, I got, I was out at the airport and some kids crashed into a mountain between Colorado Springs and Denver coming back in bad weather.
Mm-hmm.
And the Army National Guard here did not have a doctor. So they grabbed me at the field and asked me if I'd go out and uh, see if they were survivors. We knew there weren't, but I did in their helicopters and actually had to sort of rope down on a rope to where the plane was, and they were hanging upside down from the seat belts. And been there for 36 hours, so no doubt about that. But anyway, the guy who was flying was the commander of the helicopter squadron at Buckley, and he asked me if I wanted to be their flight surgeon. So for this was before I left for Israel, I was their flight surgeon for 4 or 5 years, and at the same time, I was the wing wing aerospace medical officer for the Colorado Civil Air Patrol. So we would take the search and rescue people out to Buckley and train them in loading and unloading helicopters that weren't on the ground, that were hovering and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I got to get checked out in a helicopter, although I was never officially a helicopter pilot. But once a week, I went out with another pilot, and we'd fly for a couple hours in those loaches, the little ones that are like a glass bubble
Right.
in front.
Mm-hmm.
So I got pretty proficient in that, and I enjoyed that very much. Helicopters are much more dangerous than fixed wing aircraft.
Hmm.
They have too many moving parts.
Except for the Osprey. That might be a little bit more dangerous.
Well, it's a helicopter of a type,
Yeah.
but in the Army National Guard, by the way, that was a secret army. I'll tell you about that in a second. In the Army National Guard, for every hour that the helicopters flew, there was 8 hours of maintenance.
Right.
All these mechanics and people associated with the helicopters, including except for the commander and stuff, were all National Guardsmen with jobs outside the Army, but subject to active duty call on a moment's notice. So you could call up a whole helicopter squadron in a matter of days and activate all these people that their only active duty training was 2 days a month and 2 weeks a year.
Mm-hmm.
And they were the secret army because they were paid as civil servants
Right.
by the government. So that was an interesting aspect of how they keep more people technically on active duty.
Got it. Yeah, it's wow. I mean, Bob, you've done a lot. I don't know what else to say. I think it's awesome, and I'm happy that we were able to have the time here together to be able to talk a little bit. And the main thing is just I appreciate you and what you've done in the past and what you continue to do for the community. And obviously meetings are not going on anymore, and things are different. But you were there when we didn't have very many people at the post showing up, and now we have about 40 people every month that are coming to the meetings, and you were a part of that group initially that were putting this stuff together. So I think it's very appropriate to thank you for being a part of that. And when I started showing up there, you're always super nice to me and everything else. So I definitely appreciate you guys for everything, and continue to inspire me and I think a lot of other people, in a sense of when people think about today, and they think about, oh man, things are really bad in the US. I think hearing stories from you guys, I think puts things into perspective on like what bad really means, in a sense of you were in Vietnam, you did other things, in your life that had different context to what is going on today. And I think these stories are amazing and hopefully inspire people to not always follow the path of, success and what is defined by their parents or by society, but really just going after what they truly want to do as opposed to what they should be doing, if that makes any sense.
I was having a talk with a doctor's friend of mine that says, we did it in World War II. We were making a Liberty ship every day. Why can't we get the people out? There's 20 million shots out, and they've given 3 or 4 million of them.
Mm-hmm.
There are others that are sitting around. Why can't we get people out working 24 hours a day giving shots? And I say, you don't have the people today that would go out of their way to work extra hours or come out and give these shots.
Yeah.
It's just a different world.
So what have you thought about the whole, I mean, you obviously have the medical background, about the whole pandemic and how things were handled last year, and like moving forward now that we have that experience on like what not to do, probably, what do you think should be like implemented on a strategic level, like for the country in case something like this happens again? Because it's going to happen again.
We should be quicker to close our borders completely.
Mm-hmm.
China really dumped infected people all over the world,
right,
so that the world would suffer. So, are you going to make any use of any of the pictures you get off of this talk?
To be honest, not really, because the lighting was a little bad. But if you have any other pictures that you want to add, we can throw them in the video. And like if you were talking about the things, like pictures from your service, working in the medical field, going to Israel, any of that stuff, if you want to send it to me via email, I will add it as we cut the video, and people can see those pictures as well.
Well, let me try to send you some pictures right now, and if you like any of them, my wall is pretty well covered. I don't know how well this will work. And Can you see any of this?
Yeah, I can see it. I will just add it. Like if you send me like a digital copy of it, I'll just add to it like when we see it and go from there. But um, no,
This
it's
is my granddaughter who was in the Israeli army
oh,
for for 3 years.
mm-hmm. And does she still live there, or is she back in the States?
This is a picture of me when I became a major. This is a picture I got from the Israeli Air Force. I can't digitize this. It's four F-15s over Masada. Can you
Nice.
see that?
Yeah, I do actually. It's really cool.
And these are my medals. I don't know if you can see that.
Yep.
And there's a lot of pictures and stuff, which I can't digitalize, but I have a lot of stuff I could send you.
Yeah,
So
not a problem. We'll see what we can do. But
okay,
well,
hope I didn't bore you too much.
no. It was very interesting. I learned a lot actually about you, for sure. I mean, you've done so much. I admire that because like I'm in the same boat where I kind of go with the flow and kind of see where it takes me. And it seemed like you kind of did that as well, where you know you've changed careers, you've changed industries, you've done quite a bit.
Can you see this?
Yeah, who's that young fella?
That's me
Oh yeah.
when I was 13 years old in
Okay.
the Civil Air Patrol. And at that time, our meeting was at O'Hare Field before it was a commercial airport,
Got it.
and it was a military airport.
Huh.
And I was acting as an air policeman
Got it.
directing traffic.
Okay.
I can I have pictures like this I have and digitalized. So I take what you want. And do you know who's going to be president next year?
You mean like is this a like? Well, let's wait till January 6th, and then we'll have the official, the official okay. But yeah,
It's a secret.
no. But the electoral college gets approved by the
No,
Congress.
I'm talking about the Jewish war veteran.
Oh, I have.
Commander. Wrong word, commander.
Oh, I have no clue. So
Hmm. Okay, I hope by next summer or next fall we can start having meetings again.
yeah, it'd be nice to catch up with everybody and see everybody. Looking forward to that. So I get back home in a couple months. We'll be in touch, and worst case, I'll come down to Castle Rock. We'll have a coffee somewhere or whatever.
Okay, well, I'll take you up flying, and then if it's open, we can have a meal. It's a perfect landing at the airport.
Okay.
That probably won't be until June or July.
Okay. Yeah, I'll get back in April timeframe, so I'll be around.
What are you doing out there?
I'm just working management consulting stuff, so nothing crazy.
Okay, well, thanks for putting up with me.
No, I appreciate it. Thanks so much for your time, and we'll be in touch. And I'll send you a link to the audio version of it.
Okay, and his email that came with this to get on this program a
Mm-hmm.
good email for you?
Yeah, that's the one I use. So, yep, I'll send you another link with the stuff after it's edited and what have you, and then you can share it with your friends, family, whatever.
Okay,
All right. Well, thanks
thanks
so
for
much.
doing it.
Yeah, have a good week.
You too, bye.
Bye. The show is produced and engineered by myself, Ben, out of Denver, Colorado. Be sure to subscribe to our social media or wherever you consume content, iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, etc. Big shout out to Mike Xavier. Thank you so much for letting us use your music as part of our show. Be sure to check him out as well on social media. And stay tuned for the next show.